Cookson, Head of Corporate Development and Strategy at Marimaca Copper Corp, and we are developing the Marimaca oxide deposit in the Antofagasta region of northern Chile.
Good to see you, Nico. Right, you're sitting in for Hayden today, the busy boy. So what's the news?
Yeah, so this morning we received what's called our ICSARA, which is really the first milestone of our permitting process in Chile. So if you recall, at the end of December last year, we submitted our environmental permitting application. In Chile, there are really two avenues you can go down for that. One is called the DIA, one is called the EIA. We believe firmly that we are in the fast-tracked DIA process. So this milestone is really, confirmation from the authorities after the initial review period that we can continue on with that strategy.
Okay, and just maybe explain the kind of ICSARA review process. What's involved?
Sure. So post-submission, there's basically a 45-day review period from the regulators reviewing everything you submitted alongside your DIA, so all of your baseline study work and all of the study work that went into the submission. The submission itself back in December was over 4,000 pages long. So this was many years of preparation that went into what was put forward in December. And basically the 45-day review period is a chance for the various regulatory bodies to review what you've submitted and look and ask questions or ask for clarifications based on the work that you've done. There are, several outcomes that can come out of that review period. One is obviously the receipt of the ICSARA, which is the first sort of consolidated question list from the authorities that we have to now respond to, and which we will start responding to. But some of the other alternatives are things like an early termination or a request to resubmit under an EIA. Neither of which were received by us. So a positive step for us and really reaffirms our timelines and strategy for this year.
Okay, and were there any other some clarifications, rectifications, or extensions requested in there? Other than
yeah, so the ICSARA itself is a list of questions that comes back based on what you've submitted. So all of the, as I said, regulatory agencies review the baseline study work and design work that went into the submission and come back with further requests or additional requests for new study work or clarifications or questions or inclusions for the next round. So there are some items that we'll have to go back to the field and complete now based on those requests, but it's nothing unexpected for us, and it won't interfere with how we're approaching our timelines this year. So if anything, it was as I said, a vote of confidence, and now we're thinking about our timelines and preparing for what's left of this year and next year.
Right, so you're getting confident around those timelines, so therefore I guess doesn't really have you don't expect it to have an impact in terms of the RCA approval later this year then?
No, I think, as I said, everything that came back in the ICSARA was expected. The big validation point for us is really that our view of this project from an execution risk lens is that it's very, very well positioned, and I think that speaks to our strategy in terms of submitting under a DIA versus an EIA. And the test for whether or not you're in one or the other is really whether or not your project generates a significant environmental impact on any one silo of what you're actually studying. So under the DIA, there is no significant environmental impact. So the confirmation and the progression with the ICSARA, is affirmation from the regulators that they feel we can continue to progress with the DIA.
Right. Okay. And obviously, the environmental component is a big part of the risk mitigation exercise that you guys will have journey that you've been on during this. But what sort of environmental or social risks did you identify during the process before submitting?
Yeah, look, a lot of them were standard that come with any mining operation. I think in Chile, there's particular sensitivities to things like water, for example. I think if you tried to permit a project in this day and age with the use of continental or groundwater in this part of Chile, it would be very difficult given the scarcity value of water and the current usage factor of the mining industry in freshwater resources. So, these are things we identified several years ago and positioned ourselves and strategized our permitting submission with that in mind. So, for example, as we are going to be using recycled seawater from the Bay of Mejillones from existing already permitted intake infrastructure there, from the power systems in Mejillones. So things like that are what we've designed around in this permitting submission. And I think, again, reflects why we think we should be able to move through this on a fast track basis.
Right, and obviously there's a lot going on operation on the ground as well. But in terms of the team set up, the allocation of those resources to ensure the kind of smooth RCA approval, what have you guys lined up? Because the timing of that's going to be critical, and getting that over the line is critical to the business.
Yeah, look, I think last year we recognized that if things go to plan in terms of the acceptance of our DIA, then building out of the team to sort of a build ready status is going to be critical for this year. So it's been a big focus for us for the last 6 months. I think we've made some key hires, guys like Alexis and Oscar, who joined our team in September from the Manto Verde build over at Capstone. Been sort of instrumental in building out the owner's team underneath them. There are a vice president of projects and vice president of project execution, respectively. So the team's really been built out. I think now that we have the ball rolling on the permitting process and sort of more clear timelines on when we expect that RCA in hand, I think we can move now into thinking about what happens post DFS and moving into that detailed design and engineering phase, and really repositioning some of the team that was working hard on the design elements of the permitting submission into focus on getting ready for an FID decision in early 2026.
Right. So do you think the company Marimaca is sort of aligning with Chile's sort of evolving environmental regulations? Things have been changing quite rapidly since the new government's come in. Since the election. So what are you doing to kind of work more closely, either locally and federally?
Yeah, look, I think the closest municipality to us is the town of Mejillones. We have done 2 public consultations there and received some fantastic feedback over the course of the last 12 months, led by our team, Jose Antonio Marino, in country. The municipality there will be worked into how we think about staffing the project, for example. And so far, so good in terms of feedback and support from the community there. I think, look, sustainability for us has always been a core focus in how we want to bring this project forward. We have the chance, I think, to present what is or what will be a very green copper project in terms of when you think about the holistic approach to development here and what the product is that we'll actually produce. This is a grade A cathode project that won't require any smelting or refining. So I think we have the opportunity to present a project that is sort of at the forefront of sustainability and sustainable approach to development. So that's been a focus for us for the last 12 months, and it's been going very well.
Okay, so assuming the RCA approval is granted on schedule, in a time frame which is expected, what are the kind of sort of key milestones for the project in terms of the project development?
Yeah, look, next focus for us will be getting the DFS out, which is still planned for late in the first half of this year. As I said before, we'll move straight from there into thinking about detailed design and engineering. We're moving into detailed design and engineering and getting prepared for long lead items. There are obviously implications for how we think about financing that. We have kicked off our debt engagement process. We have brought on advisors to help us with that. So we'll be moving that alongside the project progression for the balance of this year, because, as you say, if we get our RCA in hand by the end of this year, then we will be in a position to sanction the project in the first half of next year. And we want to have everything lined up, ready to go, so that we don't waste any time between, final receipt or receipt of final approvals and moving forward on the project.
Okay, so is the DFS contingent on getting the permitting, or can you conclude the DFS subject to getting the permitting? What's the order?
Yeah, you can decouple them in Chile. So we don't have to wait for receipt of the RCA in order to get the DFS out. We will publish the DFS in the interim, but I think the opportunity that the decoupling of the permitting process and the DFS does give us is that we can take, for example, the recommendations or the clarifications requested in the ICSARA and work those into the DFS and into the project that will ultimately build. So it lets us in real time build in feedback from the regulators in terms of what we know we can actually permit and build here. I don't expect it's going to change significantly from what we've been messaging previously to the market. Very straightforward open pit oxide operation targeting that sort of 50,000 tons per annum of cathode range. I think where we do see potential changes is on the upside story that we've been progressing and evolving with Pampa Medina and potential expansions in the future there. There are some design elements in the DFS that we have to think about so that if we want to expand in the future, for example, we don't have a big retrofit or a big engineering headache that comes with trying to expand pipes or pools, etc. So, there's been probably a month of delay on the DFS, just taking those things into account now that Pampa Medina has been sort of shaping up. But again, everything remains on track for sort of end of the first half of this year to hopefully get that released.
Okay, fine. And in terms of the DFS and the economics around the DFS, because that's what people will be looking at closely, your expectation in relation to the environmental permitting questions, the DIA, is there enough headroom, I guess, for changes as you may find when you sort of are answering questions with ICSARA?
Yeah, I think so. As I said before, the questions that came back in the ICSARA were things that were not a huge surprise to us. I think they're things that we appreciate. We appreciate that we may have to do a bit more work on. But again, in the DFS, what was presented in the DIA submission is the DFS will ultimately be a more refined version of that with the tweaks that I mentioned. According to the feedback we get, but we don't expect it to change materially from what was presented in the DIA. And I think the benefit that we have really is our access to infrastructure. Nothing changes about that, and the ore body itself. Nothing's changing about that. Our strip ratio over the life of mine we expect to be way significantly less than 1-to-1. So I think we'll be stacking ore from day one, and all the elements that we expect will drive very competitive capital intensity for our project remain firmly intact. I think for us, it's more about where is the trade-off between spending a bit more now so there isn't a big, engineering exercise in the future to expand. Those sorts of trade-offs that we'll be considering over the next 4 months for the DFS.
Okay, so you've anticipated any associated costs. Can we talk a little bit about the kind of exploration and growth strategy a little bit, if you don't mind, with Pampa Medina exploration? So how does that fit into this long-term growth strategy of yours?
Yeah, look, I think the vision for the district is really a hub and spoke type model with Marimaca anchoring what will be the production center. When we acquired Pampa Medina and Madrugador and consolidated that district in the second half of last year, we inherited some very nice near surface leachable high grade historical resources. And what the exploration has shown to date is that we think there is potential to significantly expand those resources. So what that means for us is that we have a very attractive and highly cost competitive development project in Marimaca that will ultimately be developed first and on time if things stay as currently planned. And in the future, we have an opportunity to work in these district oxide resources and expand the production base from Marimaca, but use the cash flows from the initial development project, Marimaca, to fund some of that expansion and CapEx infrastructure.
Okay, and what does that look like at the moment? Because obviously, heads down focused on the permitting process, MOD, but in terms of impacting timelines or, quite frankly, investment allocation for Pampa Medina, what's the kind of trade-off there?
Yeah, look, I think currently we're budgeted for our parallel track of all the development work we want to do at Marimaca this year, as well as the 10 to 15,000 meters of exploration drilling that you and Hayden have spoken about previously at Pampa Medina that we want to complete in the first quarter. I'd say previously that 10 to 15,000 meters we were planning on spreading out over a bit more time, but given the initial feedback from the team and the results that we released in December, we've accelerated that program to squeeze most of that into Q1. So we may consider expanding budgets for the exploration side of the business in the second half of the year. But those are conversations we're still having internally and we'll formulate over the next month or so. But I think on a longer dated, when you talk about the longer dated capital allocation, nothing changes about how we are going to approach Marimaca, because the initial development project really aside from, the design elements I spoke about earlier is not changing because of Pampa Medina. We'll build, the starter project to target 50,000 tons of oxide cathode production from Marimaca. And then, several years into that operation, consider how best to expand to incorporate, the resources that we've been proving up around Pampa Medina. What that looks like, still up in the air. I think most likely it'll be some sort of scenario whereby, you're crushing and leaching at Pampa Medina, for example, and pumping the pregnant leach solution to an expanded SXEW plant at Marimaca. But again, that's a very common practice in Chile. But again, we're working through these studies at Pampa Medina right now in order to determine what that will look like in the future.
Right. So you're getting a sense of, what it's going to look like. I'm trying to work out, and I guess now as an investor hat on, go, well, what does it look to people outside? Because if you've got some strategics in there already, you will be no doubt starting to be approached by potential other offtake partners and strategic buyers. How are you packaging this and designing this for institutional investors or potential strategic partners? Because you're an advanced development play, and obviously this, I think Hayden refers to it as an inflection point. It smells close,
Yeah. Look, I think what's been resonating really well with investors in the market has been the core project Marimaca, which we feel garners most value in the market for us, has really been going through a big de-risking 12 months for us in terms of getting the permitting submission done and entered, getting receipt of the ICSARA and confirmation of the DIA process, and also progress on the DFS. So there's a natural multiple expansion as you move through that and you get closer to construction, particularly on projects that are buildable for a company of our size. Now, what we feel, the market may be missing right now is that when you think about these acquisitions and consolidations that we've made, like Pampa Medina, it really changes the picture for the future of Marimaca and what the district looks like. I think what the DFS will demonstrate is that we'll have a very nice, mid-sized, buildable, and high return copper project. But what Pampa Medina does is that it adds another leg to the story in terms of potentially expanding this project into something that becomes, of global relevance in terms of scale. And, you could argue what does that mean? What is globally relevant in terms of scale? Some people would say 75,000 tons per annum, which we think is, a reasonable target in the future for us. But what we think, as I said, the market is missing is that we're not far away from putting those numbers forward in terms of doing the work at Pampa Medina and showing that, you'd be able to integrate this into what is already an exceptional development project with relatively low capital intensity and relatively low execution risk, given a lot of the attributes that we have at Marimaca also apply to Pampa Medina in terms of low elevation, easy access, and access to critical infrastructure in the region.
And how are you feeling about that in the context of what you're seeing? Okay, copper prices sort of moving sort of creatively. We had a surge last year, which sort of fell away as quickly as it came, but it seems to be the sort of steady state growth in copper price, which is obviously helpful. Not a lot of supply being talked about coming into the market. I mean, what's your view on the macro and what that could do for the business if you get this right?
Yeah, look, I think the potential timing of our project is very good compared to where we see the supply and demand dynamics over the next 10 years. I think there are more projects that can be delivering copper on a 10-year time frame than there are on a 5-year time frame. I think when we run our searches for comparable projects that can be delivering cathode or concentrate in the next 3 years, there is almost nothing, particularly nothing owned by single asset developers in the Americas. So we feel like the end of this decade is the right time to be contributing to where we see the supply and demand dynamic to be, the most exciting. So I think the confirmation of the DIA with the receipt of this ICSARA confirms and supports that again, because if we were to resubmit under the EIA pathway, that would cost us another, say, 12 to 18 months. But with things currently as they stand, we should be in a position to be, as I said, sanctioning the project in the first half of next year and ultimately delivering copper in 2028.
Nico, appreciate your time today. An inflection point indeed. We will see you soon.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.